Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to Amber Shaper Onsock 25-man normal in the Heart of Fear.
Yeah, this fight's actually really cool. It's got like new little vehicle parts in it where you get transformed, and it's just really cool. It's a nice fight. It's a good, lovely fight.
Now for this encounter you want to bring 2 tanks, 5 to 6 healers and a mixed makeup of DPS. It doesn't really matter too much what you bring. Really. And it is a free phase fight. And to start off we're going to talk about phase 1.
Yes, now in phase 1 the boss has quite a few mechanics and we're going to go through them one by one. And first off we're going to talk about Amber Scalpel. Now this is basically a beam that chases a ranged player, dealing damage if you're hit and leaving little spots on the ground where it has been, which do damage if you stand them. Now these are very small. Now some of these spots will spawn an ad called a living amber. Now out of the Amber Scalpel, all the spots that it makes, it will ever only spawn 4 ads per Amber Scalpel.
Now these ads, all they'll do is just fixate on a random player and do like melee damage to them. They'll literally just melee swing. And the damage from them is pretty pathetic. It's not really too much of an issue. However, you still need to kill these ads, and when they do die, they'll leave like a pool of burning amber on the ground. They'll also heal any other living amber for 40% health and deal 70k damage to anything within 8 yards when they do explode, when they do eventually die.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that when you do kill them, that you kill them far apart and without, as you don't want to have too many people standing on top of them, because 70k damage is just extra to heal, which you don't really need to do.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter too much on normal, but it's probably a good thing to start getting used to as you're going to be moving on to heroic fairly soon.
So apart from these ads and the beam, he'll also cast something called Parasitic Growth. This is a debuff that is applied to a random player that deals 25k damage every 2 seconds, and if the target receives any healing during this debuff, it will increase the amount of damage done by the debuff. So the player who has this debuff needs to try and not take any more damage, because you don't want to get healed. But you should also try and avoid AoE heals just to be completely safe. After 30 seconds the debuff would drop off and then you could be healed up again.
Yeah, the only reason this target should be healed is if they're going to die, because of course you can heal them still, but it just means they're going to be taking more damage, so just don't go too crazy healing them. Just top them up if they really need it.
Now the main ability in this phase, and all the other phases, is Reshape Life. This will turn a player into an amber mob that acts like I suppose it's a vehicle.
It's a vehicle, yeah.
And it can be attacked by both players and mobs, and you'll gain a completely new vehicle toolbar. So if you are using add-ons that make your vehicle bars fuck up, like I do personally, then yeah, make sure you turn them all off before you start this encounter.
Now the amber vehicles, called Mutated Constructs, have a rage-like bar that slowly depletes, called willpower. Now certain abilities that you use and are used against you will decrease this willpower. If you run out of willpower, you will not be able to control the Mutated Construct, and it will just fuck everyone up, and literally that would either need to be killed and then you'll die. It's just not a good thing. Just make sure you don't run out of willpower. Now these Mutated Constructs have 4 moves that they can control and 1 that they cannot. Now the 4 moves that they can control are Amber Strike. Now this is basically a 250k damage hit to a target, and it interrupts spell casting. It also applies a debuff to that target that increases the amount of damage they take by 10% for 15 seconds, and this stacks. And now this is the first move on your new action bar, and yeah, this is one of the main moves you're going to be using as well.
Now the second ability on your action bar is Struggle for Control, and this will force you to seize all action for like half a second. It increases the damage that you take by 100% for 5 seconds, and that will cost willpower.
Yeah, it's the only move that does cost willpower. It costs 8 willpower on yourself, and basically it just stops you from doing anything, which is needed to counter some other abilities that we're going to talk about very soon. Now the third move you have on your action bar is Consume Amber. This will go and eat a pool left by a living amber. You know, it's very similar to Professor Putricide and ICC this shit, but yeah, you go and consume this pool, and this will give you 20 willpower back. This will also heal you for 6.3 million and add the same amount to your total health. Now this is the third move on the action bar, as you said, and we'll tell you when and when not to use this.
And the fourth ability on the action bar is Break Free. And once you're taken below 20% health, you can use this ability and it will free you from the construct. It's your leave vehicle button, basically, but you need to be below 20% health to do it.
Now there is one move that you cannot control, and it is a cast called Amber Explosion. After a cast, you will do 175k damage to all players. Now when you are casting this, you've got to use your Struggle for Control move, which is the second one, and that will interrupt you from exploding on the raid. Also on top of this, your melee attacks will always just do 40k damage, like so even if you're a healer or I don't know, like a mage or something, you can just, that's how you do damage consistently when you have this buff on you.
So in this phase, only the tank will ever be transformed into one of these amber constructs. The boss will transform his current target, so you must taunt off the tank immediately, as any melee swings that taken by Onsock will take away 40 willpower, so you don't want the constructs to be tanking.
Now once you are transformed as a tank in this phase, you want to be spamming Amber Strike, which is the first move in your toolbar on the boss, so you can stack the damage taken debuff. You also want to make sure that you interrupt your own Amber Explosion by using Struggle for Control, which is number 2. Now the DPS should cleave you down to under 20% and then leave you completely alone, as you want to be in this form for as long as possible in order to make it so when the next tank is transformed, he can continue the damage taken debuff from the boss, which is from the Amber Strike. Now DBM timers are like the easiest way of doing this, of course. Now just make sure that if you lose too much willpower, you leave the Amber vehicle as soon as you possibly can, because you don't want to go apeshit and just kill the whole raid. So just try and rotate the tanks back and forth so you can keep this stack going. If it does drop, then it doesn't really matter too much, but it's just a really cool thing you can do.
So just to wrap it up very, very quickly regarding those ads, you need to make sure that you never run out of willpower, because if you run out of willpower, then you essentially die and become a mob that's then going to start attacking the raid, and you want to stack up the debuff on the boss as much as you possibly can and interrupt your Amber Explosion. Yeah. That's more or less
so
it.
In phase 1, in theory, you can just, if you're very, very uncomfortable as a tank taking this reshaped life, you can actually just get out of it straight away. There's no reason for you actually to be in it. You need it for the next 2 phases, but for this phase, the reshaped life is kind of just showing you how it works.
So you continue kiting the beams away and kill the ads as they spawn, while the tanks do their thing in the vehicles until 70%, and this is when phase 2 will start.
Now in this phase, the boss gains a buff that reduces all damage he takes by 99%, so yeah, there's no point attacking him because, yeah, you just won't kill him. And he also spawns an ad called the Amber Monstrosity. Now the boss keeps all of his moves from phase 1, but now he doesn't apply the reshaped life on the tanks, instead he will cast it on anyone else in the raid, so your DPS, your healers, and all that stuff. And the phase ends when you kill the Monstrosity.
Now the Monstrosity himself has a couple of abilities, and the first one is Massive Stomp. This is just a large stomp that does about 150k damage to everyone within 15 yards and knocks them back. So when he casts it, just make sure you move away. He will do an ability called Fling, which will pick up the tank and throw him at a distant player, dealing around 125k damage to all players within 8 yards of that target, and it'll also stun them for 3 seconds. So try and spread out 8 yards or more if you can during this phase, and you need to make sure that you taunt when the other tank has been thrown.
Now his melee attacks will reduce the willpower of the Amber vehicles by 40% again, so just make sure that when you are in the Mutated Constructs, that you never do get hit, because yeah, it just sends you crazy quickly.
And the final ability is Amber Explosion. This is a cast that he does, and once it finishes, it'll deal 225k damage to everyone in the raid, and you need to interrupt this, and the only way you can interrupt this ability is with the Amber vehicles.
So basically what you need to do is your Amber Strike, which is number 1, interrupts cast, if you remember. Now you need to do this when he casts it. You also want to use this as much as possible in order to apply the debuff to him as well. So what you've got to make sure is it is an on cooldown when the explosion is going to come in. So just use boss timers again. Like this fight, if you don't use boss timers for some fucked up reason, get them for this fight, because it just helps you so much. Now you should stay in your form for as long as possible in this phase, because you are literally just stacking it up. The only reason that you would want to leave your form is if you were a healer and you need to help with healing, and what you do, you just get your DPS to cleave you down. You should go and use your Consume Amber, which is number 3, on nearby pools if you need to get energy back, which you will do because it does deplete slowly. Now you may come across a time when both you and the Amber Monstrosity are casting Amber Explosion. At this point you want to let yours through and interrupt his, because his does so much more damage than yours. It's ridiculous. If you can interrupt both because you're amazing, then awesome.
Great, yeah, that's perfect.
It's not very easy.
So during the phase, you just want to continue to nuke down the Monstrosity and kill the living Ambers, interrupt the Amber Explosion, and once the Monstrosity dies, phase 3 will start.
Now in this phase, he continues to cast Parasitic Growth, but he stops casting Amber Scalpel. He will also cast Reshape Life a lot more often, so you're going to have a lot of these vehicles all the time. He also gains a 50% damage buff and a 50% attack speed buff.
He also now causes the pools of amber around the room to shoot bolts at random players, dealing around 45k damage a hit. If these target an amber vehicle, then it heals them for 20% of their health, so it's hard to kill any vehicles at this stage.
Yeah, in this phase you will not be killing anyone, so that means that you're going to need to go around in these vehicles and consume these amber pools, so you won't go crazy and start beating the shit out of people, because regardless, these won't die in this phase, so if you do lose willpower, they'll still stay there because you won't be able to kill them because of this mechanic.
As a mutated construct in this phase, you really want to just nuke the boss as much as you possibly can, as well as obviously still interrupting your own Amber Explosion using the number 2 ability. So because in this phase, because quite a lot of you guys will be inside the constructs, the strike stacks on the boss will get incredibly high, and the debuff on him will just become huge, meaning your DPS will go through the roof. So the boss dies relatively quick in this last phase.
Yeah, so just make sure that when you're in the construct that you are meleeing him as well, because otherwise you are losing a significant amount of damage, because the amber strikes are on quite big cooldown. Now, as the rest of the raid, what you want to do is just stack up, use Bloodlust, nuke the boss, use the whole raid-wide cooldowns, defensive cooldowns, all this shit, because the boss, of course, is doing increased damage. So just do your best just to get through this phase as quickly as you can. Of course, he's still doing Parasitic Growth. If you have got that on you, then make sure that you're kind of out of the group so you don't receive those AoE heals.
So that's it. Thanks for watching. If this guide helped you out, please drop us a like. It helps us out a lot, and make sure to comment, rate and subscribe.
And if you'd like to see any of our other 25-man normal guides, then please do click up on the screen now on the annotations, and that'll take you straight over to those videos.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.